So welcome back. Welcome to freaking 2026. That's hard to believe. It's so good to see everybody. Happy New Year. I'm feeling great, but I was sick before and a little bit during the holidays. So I have a cough drop. I have a cough. And I clear my throat a lot. So apologies for that in advance. And I'm going to try to mute myself if I cough, and apologies if I don't quite make it to the mute button. As I said just a minute ago, if you're live here, please feel free to use the chat to make this a conversation. Also, if you're live, you are entered to win, if you want to be, you're entered to win a free mini coaching session. This was originally supposed to be in December, but I was sick. So what I had said back then was, if you join me on this wonky week of the year, I will, incentivize you to join by giving you two entries. This is already, and then January, this is also a really wonky week. We usually have more people. Oh, here's one more person coming in. We usually have more people. So again, because you joined me in a weird week, I'm going to happily give you 2 entries to win. And when you're entered to win a free session, if you don't win this month's drawing, your name stays in the quote hat. So you'll have 2 entries in that hat. So you could easily win in a few months, as well as this month. I usually draw them at the end of the month. And I haven't drawn for December yet because I was sick. So there will be, 2 or 3 coming out, even just of this month. So you've good odds is what I'm trying to say. So if you'd like to be entered to win a free mini session, just go to the chat and click enter me and type enter me. And that's enough. And that'll enter you. Okay. Let's see. What other logistics do I have before I jump in? I always encourage my clients to do this because I forget as well. Let me let you know what's going on in my world, in my business right now in terms of available spots before I forget to tell you at the end. And then hopefully I'll remember to also tell you at the end. I am booking. I've got 2 spots, I think, for varying start dates in this quarter for long-term coaching. And then I have some space for some 1-week intensive. So if you're looking for something like some New Year strategic planning, getting my eyes on something, if you're launching something new, the intensive is really great for just like a focus sort of project, if you will. But my 6-month ongoing coaching spots, I've got only 2 right now available for sort of some availability between now and the end of March. I may have another one open up or 2, more like March. If those open up, it'd probably be March, because that'll depend really on renewals, but I have like an 80 to 90% renewal rate. So I'm just not sure. I'm not at a point where I can open up more spots. So 1 or 2, so 2 spots now if you're looking for ongoing coaching. And all you do to start that is just to book a discovery call. It's completely free. And chat is disabled. Oh, thank you. Well, that's not helpful. Okay. Thank you, Morgan. Okay, try me now. So if you're interested, all you got to do is book a discovery call. It's no pressure. It's truly just a conversation to see what's going on in your business. I can walk you through a little bit of like kind of how I coach and what my style is and my approach. Oh, good. Chat's working. And we can see if it's a good fit. Okay. So what we're talking about today is last year turned out to be my 2nd best year ever in business. 2nd best year yet. 2nd best year so far. Let's not say ever. And I want to talk about what 2020, I'm gonna probably butcher the whole this last year kind of thing. What happened in my business in 2025. So, I had a lot of personal challenges in 2025. And so for me, one of the big wins is that I could have, I think it's such a great lesson in, kind of, I'm a big fan of the woo, but kind of the opposite of what I would say like overly simplified manifestation things that people teach, which is like, well, if you feel good and your vibe is good, then you'll make money and all of that. And I agree that is true. And I literally was like sick in bed and got a message from a person who wanted to return as a client last year. And so like, I think it's just last year was a good sort of like example of that's actually not true. It's not a black and white sort of truth. And so I want to talk about that. I want to talk, as always, I approach my coaching, the way I look at business and frankly, the way I look at the world is both from the practical strategy side of things, the business side of things, as well as the mindset. And so you're going to hear me talk from both sides today around what I did mindset-wise last year, what I did practically speaking last year. Again, feel free to ask me any questions as we go. Okay. Let's see. I first just want to quickly check the chat because I know that it's working, but I just want to make sure nobody had a startup question. Okay, you're just entering yourself. Great, good. Okay. So a couple of just level setting. It was my second best revenue year ever. I think it's also important to say something I didn't remember/realize until this year, because I was sick during the holidays, sick and then traveling during the holidays. And so I'm still doing my year-end reflections and my New Year's planning. There's no wrong time to do that, friends. One thing I realized when I went back and looked at my best year so far, I actually paid myself more last year. So I made a little bit less. It was actually pretty close. I made a little bit less last year than my best year, but I paid myself significantly more. I was more profitable, mainly without getting too much into the 2022, whatever that year was my best year. Without getting too much into that, because this isn't about that year, this is about 25. One big thing that was different was I had a pretty big team. I had a lot more content going out. I had a slightly different, I was much more dependent on social media, and I had a lot more content going out and therefore a lot more team members supporting me. And so, and I also, I think I might have even had a group that year. So I just had more to manage behind the scenes, and therefore more people behind the scenes managing that. And so that was the number one reason a lot more of my income was going to pay my team. And I have I have a one-person team in addition to myself now, and it's just more streamlined. And so that was a win as well. Okay. A couple other things about last year, not just my revenue, but my email list and my LinkedIn following grew by about the same amount as it did the year before. So no big change there, just continual, but I think that's important to say, like in terms of like understanding the results, understanding what's happening in the business. Real Connections, if you don't know, I run a monthly networking event that's free, and that also helps me. That's one of my funnels. It helps me grow my list. The Real Connections numbers also went up in almost every single category. Last year, the one that I particularly think is important is our average number of people that attended. In 2024, we had an average of 17 people per event. In 2025, we had an average of 35 people per event. So that's an 81% increase. So we've got more and more people coming through. I haven't run the numbers yet on the referrals, but just from what I have seen over the years and the numbers that I have run this from last year, I believe the majority of the new people coming into Real Connections are coming through referrals, which means people who come to Real Connections share that with their network, with their people, and that's how we're getting new people in. I also, of course, get some cold traffic on that, but that cold traffic versus warm sort of referrals, that percentage, in the beginning it was all cold traffic because I was just starting, but now it's like it's way more. I don't remember the percentage, but I would say more than 60%, probably more like 80%. Referrals. And so just to see sort of how that's working for me. But also that takes time. So next month is our 3-year anniversary. So we've been doing this now for 3 years. Last year, if you're looking at 2025, that was 2.5 years, depending on what part of the year you're thinking. And so I think that's just an important, it's kind of a compound effect sort of thing happening there. The other thing last year that I didn't do, nothing big. Like if you were coming to this call thinking, oh, she's going to tell me the answer, the secret that she knows that nobody else knows, some big flashy thing that she changed, that made all the difference. That's not the story of 2025 for my business. And frankly, it's not the story for most of my clients as well. Once we sort of land on certain things like a strategy and an offer. And that's not to say that I don't believe in change. I actually spent almost 20 years working in corporate before I started my business, working in change management. I'm actually I used to go into organizations to help them decide what to change, make the change, execute the change. I'm big on, living through the change. So I'm not saying that we don't need to change things, but last year was not a lesson in change. Last year was actually a lesson for my business in how do we just keep doubling down on what's working. So nothing big, nothing flashy, nothing new, nothing sexy. No shiny objects, no new offers. And I want to say that as well, no new offers. I basically have a one-on-one model. I did make one tiny change to my intensive, and I'll share that with you in a minute. I raised my rates once in the first quarter, and I had 2 sales last year. Not big sales, I think they were I don't know, $250, $200, $150, something like that. I can't remember. It was a little bit off of what is really already a high ticket offer. So it was an incentive, but nothing like I offer something 50% off or something big like that. And then a couple of other things, just as a background, if you're not familiar with my business. So I've been in business now for 8 years. So last year in September, my business turned 8. So I had 7 years when I started last year off, right? I had 7 years of solid foundations built, networking, things that were, again, working for me. And it's a lot of what this last year has taught me, and what I think this is a business sort of lesson in is, if you build it, it will keep working for you, just like a stock market investment. It's not passive, right? It just requires still more work. What was I going to say? So I had a solid foundation already when I started the business off. I have an all one-on-one practice. People work with me for 1 week or 6 months. My marketing is mostly networking and social media, and then I have an email list that I nurture pretty well. And then I have networking events, real connections, and then I also do things like this, right? So I have many years ago, I used to have a Facebook group, and I used to go live every week. Oops. Okay, my computer just decided to move you guys to a smaller screen. I'm not doing that. You can still see me. It just literally moved to the Zoom. Okay. Years ago, I had a Facebook group. I used to go live every week. This has kind of taken that place. I do it. At some point last year, I was doing it more. This year, now I'm doing it more like once or twice a month. But essentially this sort of thought leadership, let me tell you how I think about business, let me go deep in a specific topic, right? Social media is more and more tell me the quick thing and get out and hurry up and be succinct and be efficient. I am a very wordy, long-winded person. That's why long-term relationships with my clients. It's why I'm good at being a coach. It's why I'm good at one-on-one. I go deep. That's just how that's how my business is structured. That's the work that I do. That's the person that I am. I'm the person at the bar at a party that goes and finds one person and has a conversation about life. So all of that said, it's an opportunity to do better at getting more succinct and all of that. And I just know that long form content works for me. It's people continue to come. Most of my clients that have hired me last year or the year before, actually for most of the time I've been in business, have attended one of these at some point. That has been part of the nurturing process for them to understand how I think. So it works for me in terms of conversions. It works for me in terms of the way that I think and my style. I really enjoy it. It works for me in terms of my creativity because I don't want to just rely on short form content. I'm really better at long form. And so while I can ebb and flow and do what needs to be done to make the marketing work for me, I just know that this is where I shine. I've 18 times tried to launch a podcast. One day that will happen because I'm long form girl, right? So all that is to say, these work for me. I've continued to do them, and then I also have done master classes. Years ago, I used to do once a month. I think 2024, I was doing like maybe one a quarter. Last year I did one. But I really focused heavily on it. So I'll talk a little bit about that too. Okay, so I'm gonna just go quickly through the things that I had put in the email. A couple of things just so you kind of know what we're gonna talk about. So 2 tough decisions that I made about my strategy that I surprised myself when I made them last year. Wow. How I'm doing less, that's the biggest thing that I just spoiler alert, most of what last year was taking stuff off my plate, not adding. So how I'm doing that and still growing and scaling at the same time. What I had to double down on most, the biggest lesson that I learned last year that was really a relearning of the same lesson that I've learned many, many times. And I'll start with the personal challenges. I had personal challenges because I think that was sort of the underlying factor that I think is important to understand. And then what I'm celebrating the most besides the money, and why I want this for you too. And then if we get to I've got a couple of other lists of things like what was the hardest, some of the things that I slacked on, which I think might be kind of interesting. Just to remind you that like everything does not need to be perfect to have a good year. And again, I hope that that's the message that you take away. But also the key is I knew my business well when I started last year. And I was able to make the right decisions as I went to keep the business not just sustaining, but also thriving in a time where I really had to pull back. So let me start with personal stuff. I won't go too far into this because I don't think that the details are important, but I will tell you 2 main things that happened in my personal life last year that affected the business, that affected my ability to show up for the business. So number 1, at the beginning of the year, and really in 2024, I was having the symptoms, but I finally found the right practitioner to help me at the beginning of 2025. I was struggling with a lot of things, most notably some fatigue. And so that was affecting, obviously, energy levels, my ability to show up at work, my ability to have a social life, all the things. Long story short, I am now working with a really solid doctor practitioner to help me. I was diagnosed with some mineral deficiencies, so like magnesium, sodium, potassium, those kinds of things, which are like your foundations, your fundamental things in terms of the way that your cells work. And in Q1 in particular, with all the supplements and diet changes that I made, I both felt better pretty quickly, like within a week or 2, I was like, oh, everything is like just sort of calmer, and I was really running on fumes is what was happening, like cellularly and emotionally at that point, because they're all connected. And so I wasn't doing too much, and that was the thing. I wasn't doing too much. I wasn't burnt out. I wasn't overdoing, but my body felt like it was, right? And so I started to feel my reserves sort of start to come back, even as early as February. But all of those changes that I made, as the doctor said, you're going to feel worse before you feel better because you kind of have to detox. And so long story short, I was detoxing for most of the, I would say, first half of the year, 4 or 5 months maybe, where I really would like feel better in general, but then I would have like a whole afternoon where I needed to sleep the afternoon away. So it was really hard to predict my schedule. It was really hard to know how many clients I could hold. It was really hard to know, my amazing VA has been so flexible and helpful with me this year in terms of like, I'm going to get you my content by tomorrow. And then it's like, I'm going to get you my content by tomorrow. And then the next day, I'm going to get you my content by tomorrow. Very, very hard to predict and schedule my life, my business, right? Never mind my life. So that's just the one thing that I want to say is basically, I felt like crap for the first 6 months of the year, on and off unpredictably. And so really the only strategy I could execute was, 1, I have to be able to change things when I need to. I canceled on more, I shouldn't say I canceled, but I asked clients to reschedule more than I ever do, which I never do. So I asked them to reschedule like this many times, maybe 1 per person per year. But for me, that felt like a lot. It's just not something that I do, that I stick with that. And so I had to get a little more flexible with those things. I had to put a lot more blocks in my calendar to give myself more like half days with clients. And then if I had the energy to work a full day, it was something that didn't ask me to show up at a certain time, like working on my content, preparing for something like this, things like that. So I really had to mess with my schedule. And then two, we had two family emergencies this year, all related to the health of one person. So I will keep that private because it's not my story to tell. It's someone else's story to tell in my family, and I want to keep that private. But point being, one happened while I was in the States with my family, while I was there, and one happened while I was here. And so navigating that also added, I think what's important to say there is, in a year where my body was already kind of acting like it was burnt out, that added emotional stress was just something that I had to deal with. And I had to deal with my therapist, with my coach, with my body. I've changed sort of how I manage my body. I'm doing great. This person is doing really well now. Everything's on my health. Please don't worry about me. My health is good. Family is doing better. There's always something to deal with family-wise, but I think the point of the story is this is a year, as my coach even said, like, it's almost like you were pregnant all year. Like, I just had a thing weighing me down, all year. And it changed. The second half of the year was much easier to manage, and I had a lot more energy, but I'm still not at 100% of what like a normal person should be. I think it'll still be another 6 months of this for me. It's just a much better, I just feel so much better comparatively. And so all that is to say, it was a year where I was carrying a baby. It was a year where I had something else that had to take priority, or having a newborn. And how did I build my business around that? How did I adjust those things? And again, most of that was scheduling and constant changing the schedule, which is infuriating. I like to set a schedule and just move on with my life. So this recreating the wheel of my schedule was very inefficient. So much of what I want to talk about is I added efficiencies into the business. That was not efficient, right? But it was just necessary. So it was a year that maybe I shouldn't have had these epic results. And again, I think that's the lesson here. So what are the things that I did that I changed? Not much, but mostly I had, the story, right? If your body is exhausted and you need to have more time to rest, and you need more support like therapy and things like that in certain moments, it just makes sense that the business is going to have to change. And the main thing that I did was I did less things. I worked fewer hours. I asked less of myself. And when I made those choices, I'll give you a few examples, but essentially what I did is I made these choices to say, what one will keep my business running so that things continue, right? Shutting the business down. And I wasn't that bad, right? I wasn't bad enough. If I had had some serious health issues, this would have been a completely different conversation. I want to be really, really clear. I was not pushing myself. I was not 100%, but I was not really, 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 really sick either. So that was also kind of a mind fuck, right? It was I feel like crap today, but I felt great the rest of the week. That and the unpredictability of that. But the answer was there was no other choice. I had to pull back, because what I also learned, and this is normal, you're not going to be surprised by this, but was when I did pull back and was a little more conservative with my energy and didn't just do everything that I could on the days that I felt good, then it seemed like I had that energy for the next day. So really thinking about my gas tank as a whole, and how can I put some extra, I have a 3/4 of a tank, great, I'm going to fill it up, and then I'm going to maybe not let it go all the way to a quarter before I fill it back up again. So kind of managing my time that way. That was the biggest thing. But again, pulling things off my plate. So what did I pull off my plate? Real Connections used to be twice a month. That became once a month. I did that for 2 reasons, and I did a whole live about this. So if you're interested in more about that specific decision, there's a whole thing differently about that. But mainly I did it for 2 reasons. One, strategically, people out there, the world is crazy. Everybody's overwhelmed. And so adding 2 events per month really was not, it was doing well, right? It was doing really, really well, but it wasn't needed. And I've had several people say, thank you. I'm able to prioritize the once per month much easier than trying to make 2 per month. So strategically, we had 2 years under our belt at that point. We did not need 2 per month to generate and continue to grow. And actually removing that, right, supply and demand, only having one per month meant that more people showed up, more people committed, signed up and showed, but more people signed up because they were like, oh, there's only one per month, I'll just do it, right? So the supply and demand thing actually works. And like we said, the numbers have gone up since we made that change. The numbers have gone up. But the other thing that surprised me was when I was dealing with some low energy. I love Real Connections. I feel that it actually really feeds me, just creatively, emotionally, professionally. Of course, there's just strategic reasons for why I do it as well. It works for the business, but it was draining me more than my one-on-one client work. And so I could have probably predicted that, because that's one of the reasons that I let go of my group coaching and why I focused on one-on-one. I'm all one-on-one practice, and have been since maybe 2021. And so that made sense, right? Like if there's a reason that I wanted to stick with one-on-one over one-on-one and a group, and Real Connections I'm not like holding space for a group for a month. That's very different. But I am holding space for a group for an hour. And that was draining me more than it was feeding me. And so once I moved to once a month, the energy tank kind of came back, and I was able to really show up for Real Connections in the way that I wanted to. I don't know if other people noticed, but I was feeling, it was more also a drain to my schedule, right? Because it kind of would almost take up my whole day energetically. I realized that I couldn't see clients on that day. So 2 days a month I'm not seeing clients, that doesn't work. If I'm serving clients one-on-one, that's what I need to have space for. So that was both a strategic and an energy decision. The other big thing I did is I cut out coffee chats. So that's like one-on-one networking meetings, for many, many, many reasons, but mainly because when I looked at all the time on my calendar and all the things that I had to do, I had to prioritize, and clients had to win out, discovery calls had to win out, doing this had to win out, doing Real Connections had to win out, all the things that move the needle in my business. And not that one-on-one networking doesn't also move the needle in my business, but it has a lower impact now than it did maybe 7 years ago when I first started my business and I was mostly networking and very little social media. And I didn't know a lot of people. I would have made a different decision back then. And so I want to also say, please don't take this to be, oh, Livingston runs a networking group but doesn't do any coffee chats and says you don't need to. That's not what I'm saying, right? But for my business, that's just not what moves the needle the most right now. And so that had to go in a year where I was carrying a baby, right? Or a year where I had to take care of my body more than normal, more than usual. So that was a huge load off. It meant I had way more energy for one-on-one calls with my clients. I had more energy in the tank for the Real Connections. It just gave me that time back that I really needed to be able to predict my schedule, and then to really, really, really hardcore build my schedule around client calls, which again, that I always was doing that. That is my bread and butter. That is how I make money. But that became I just was like, I don't know what to call it, like uber hyper obsessed with my schedule in a way that I never have before, and hopefully never have to be like again. But it was such a good exercise in prioritization, such a good exercise in cutting out, like one-on-one networking works for me. Could I have kept it and signed more clients? Maybe, but in the grand scheme of things, I didn't have the energy. I probably would have had a week or two where I had to like crap out on the couch, right? So saving myself from that and putting my time and energy and my focus on the things that generate clients the most was the key. And that also is a little bit of a mind fuck, right? It's like, wait a minute, I'm cutting out something that I know works. I know works for me. It has worked for me for 7 years, right? And I had several conversations with my coach to process that out, because I wanted to take it off from a scheduling perspective, but I didn't want to take it off from a strategy perspective, which then became a mindset thing, right? Because that was scary to me. But letting that go gave me the energy that I needed to focus instead on putting out my marketing, putting out my Real Connections, doing all the things, again, the things that that put more needle movement out there. Does that make sense? Is that making sense? Okay. And also, because Real Connections has grown so much, I cannot have a one-on-one with everybody that's new. I could 2 years ago, I could have one-on-ones with new people. And that, again, that made sense in that moment. So please understand that this is about understanding the context and how you make business decisions. This is not, Laura Livingston says this is how everybody should do it. No, I actually, I've advised clients to do the exact opposite of what I did last year. So again, the lesson comes back to knowing your business, knowing your audience, knowing what works and what moves the needle for you the most within a priority order. This is such a good exercise to force rank all your marketing activities and be which ones work the best. And if you don't know, that's an exercise in getting to learn your business better. Work on that with your coach. Hire me to help you with that, right? Those kinds of things. I sat and I know a lot about that, but I also brought my coach in for that too, to say, help me see this more clearly. Help me really think this through and not miss something. Because it was not these were not easy decisions. My business was doing great. In fact, I was probably set up to make I would have made more last year, and I'm very okay with that. And my health is actually 10 times better. This gives me space, happy life, all the things. But I easily could have made more if I didn't have the health challenges last year. And so sitting with those decisions, I was everything is doing so well and it's really set up to really kill it this year. Am I really gonna take these things off, right? It was my mind was I'm gonna double my income this year. And then my body was I need you to rest. And that was a challenge. But again, the decisions that I made served me and I did. I made more money. I actually hit my 2024 revenue. I think I sold that much by June, but I think I made, I think it came in cash by Q3, let's say September, somewhere around there. So I already beat last year and pretty much knew that by April, May, June. But that conflict was hard and it was a mindset challenge. Okay, so let me just back up. 2 decisions that I made about my strategy that surprised even me was the Real Connections decrease and stopping coffee chats. How I'm doing less and still growing and scaling. I've really already talked about this, so let me just quickly summarize. I think first off, doing fewer things, but those things are the things that really move the needle. They are the top priority things. And then doing those with deeper focus, right? So when I had 1 Real Connections instead of 2, I had more time and energy to focus on doing them well. I made some other changes, by the way, related to the coffee chats, and the new getting to connect with the new people. Now at Real Connections, my VA makes a point to put me in rooms with the new people. So I get them for 10 minutes. It's not the same as a coffee chat, but I get something. There is a connection there. So we were okay, how can we get creative and make this happen? But it doesn't need to be, 30 minutes on my calendar and all the complication. And at some point I'll probably have to change that too, because I'm already not meeting all the new people. That's how many new people we have. So I just can't one-on-one everything. And again, as a one-on-one coach, that's really hard for me, because one-on-one helps me generate one-on-one clients. But at the same time, you have to one-to-many your marketing, right? And so that balance was important. So fewer things with deeper focus. Which also meant that I did them better. So Real Connections, I think I've done a better job. My masterclass, I only did 1 this year, and I did slides for the first time since my corporate career, which was a little bit of a mess in my head. It was hard mentally to get on board with that. But this is the best masterclass I've ever had in terms of, I think, the quality of what I delivered. But also, if you want a copy of that, if you missed it, it's called Predictable Sales. Just email me or put a note in the chat and I'll get it to you, the replay. But I think it was the best one I delivered, but I also had the best results in terms of conversions that it made, people it added to my list, people who are now in my pipeline, that kind of thing. So fewer things, deeper focus, doing it better. And then I think the other main point to make here about what did I call this? How I'm doing less and still growing and scaling is the fundamentals are queen. Fundamentals, like I said, if you came to this looking for like the interesting shiny object, the big sexy crazy new thing I did this year, like last year, like you're very disappointed. Can you hear that? Gecko? That was a gecko. Oh, you couldn't hear that. Okay. These things really block out the noise. There's a gecko in my office. But fundamentals are queen. Fundamentals matter. They've always mattered. But in a year where some people closed their doors, in a year where some people were struggling, in a year where world events were epically mind-blowing, not in a good way, it's just more important than ever. And so I think it would have been so easy to chase shiny object syndrome, but and we kind of always want to be like, well, where's the new strategy? Where's the new offer? Where's the cool, interesting thing I can do that will shift my business? But most of the time, and I would say at least 50% of my clients last year that came in new, we're struggling, and we're saying, I did well before and now I'm struggling. How do I turn the ship? And the very first thing we did is like, what's already working? Not let's scrap it all and start over, but like what's already working? How can we double down on that? How can we make it work better for you? So that's essentially what I did. And again, this is not new advice. This is very much aligned to the way that I've always approached business. It's just I kind of took a master class in it last year and had to really double down. Oh, really? You say that less is better? Show me, right? Like I had to really do that. I'm just going to look at the time. Oh, we've got time. Okay. So a couple of practical, just super quick changes that I made. I talked about Real Connections. I talked about the coffee chats. And you'll see like none of this is big, right? Like instead of 2 events a month, I went down to 1. The other thing I did is I changed Think Differently. These events used to be, when I started them, I did them weekly just to sort of start a little bit of momentum. But again, with the 2 events per month with Real Connections, and most months have 4 weeks, right? It was like 2 Real Connections and 2 Think Differently. That felt like too much to hold a live event every single week. And I don't know, like right now I'm just going to keep this path. Like I feel better, but I'm going to wait and see, right? I don't necessarily need to, I am not going to add coffee chats back. I'm not going to add a lot of stuff back. I'm going to wait and see how everything feels. I think actually I would be better spent time working on my marketing, to be honest with you. So anyway, point being, Real Connections went down. I took these down also to 1 or 2 per month, but that was a lot easier when I changed the Real Connections piece too. We talked about the coffee chats, Think Differently, and the masterclass. Yeah, so I talked about that. And then the only other thing that I did that I personally don't think is all that interesting, it certainly did not, I don't think this had anything to do with generating more money or signing more clients, but it did help me create more capacity in my time and my schedule. And that was, I used to have my intensive is 1 week long. But for, I think the first half of the year last year, it was 2 weeks. So it was 2 weeks, 1 session a week, and you get email support with me throughout those 2 weeks in between those 2 calls so that you had ongoing. So it wasn't like just the sessions, you also had email support. And that mirrors my 6-month program. My 6-month program, you get a certain number of calls per month, and then you get, I use Basecamp instead of email, but you get messaging support with me throughout the month so that, we talk about one thing, but then you're like, oh crap, or oh yay, I have a discovery call, right? Help me prepare for this. We'll prepare for that in messaging because it's going to happen before the next call, right? So there's so much that happens between calls in business. And that 2-week timeline, I could do a whole live on why I changed it, but the 2 weeks, I noticed basically that the people that needed that as a standalone offer, that just needed that to have me help them with a project and then they were off and running, they didn't need the full 2 weeks of support, and it actually made it was just a little too long, so it made it easier to like move into outside of the scope of what we talked about. It made it harder I had to set more boundaries. It just kind of felt a little bit like we don't need this much time, essentially. And then the people that needed to roll that, the whole point of that in my strategy is to help roll people into the 6-month program. Of course, it's also great for the standalone, and I offer it for that reason. But strategically, it's to help us learn how we work together, and if we're a good fit, then we continue into the 6-month program. And so the people that needed the 6-month program that were aligned to that, we knew that in a week, right? We knew that in a week, and we may as well shoulda, coulda, woulda just rolled on into the 6-month. And so the second week just started to feel unnecessary. So people still get 2 sessions, but I just do it over the course of a week, and that has felt more clean and clear. It enabled me, actually, I decreased the price on that because it's less support. And then, which was also a strategic move. And then it added capacity, because instead of, I could have 2 intensive clients that month, right? And like one at the first half of the month, one at the second half of the month. And that's a full load of intensives. Or I could have 2 intensive clients, one in the beginning of the month, take a week of just regular people, and then another one. And so does that make sense? That added more space, because I'm serving, essentially, if I had 2 intensives in 1 month before, it would be a whole month of support total of my hours, whereas now it's only 2 weeks. And so that just gives me more space and flexibility to open up other spots. It just helps me to manage my schedule. I hope that makes sense. And so again, that was really more of a capacity thing. It helped with my schedule. I don't really think that makes a huge difference. It's not like, oh, now, that solved all my problems, or that's why. I don't think, I know for sure that's not why I made more money. I made more money because I did a really good job of following up on my leads. I did a really good job of coaching the people that I had in front of me. I did a really, my marketing was working for me, and I did a really good job of knowing where to focus and to not focus on the other stuff, because I did not have the time. That's why I made more money last year. But the intensive was a change. So I think just to show you, that's really all that I changed. And I think that's strategically, that's really all that I changed. So minimal changes. These are called major, just like tiny tweaks. Okay. Keep the questions coming. Oh, I do see a chat here. Let's see. You want yes. Oh, the replay. Yes. Perfect. I'll send that to you. Okay. Just look at the time. I think I'll start with I'll go to the biggest lesson that I learned. That was a relearn. And I'm going to tell you a strategy one. I'm going to tell you a mindset one. So the biggest lesson I learned last year from a strategy perspective, I've already said, is your job as a business owner, your most important job, from a practical business standpoint, of course, you're taking care of yourself and all the things, is knowing your business so that you can make excellent business decisions that are strategic, that save you time, that get you where you want to go. And knowing that, and I like, it was just a good test, right? For me in that way, I feel like I already had, like I said, a solid foundation. I feel like decision-making is something that I'm very good at. I think it's part of why I was a good consultant and why I am a good coach. That's just something that I'm good at. I'm good at thinking strategically and looking at things holistically. That's just something that I'm good at. It's always harder to do that for yourself, but I think this was just a good sort of test of my skills in that area, but also in all the work that I've done over the years to really learn my business. That was what really helped me make those decisions. And so on the back end of that, looking at it in hindsight, right? Because I didn't know. I mean, truthfully, at the beginning of the year when I made these decisions, my goal was I just want to sustain what I have. Like, I still want to grow, and that's still my goal, and that's always the goal. But I'm very okay if I have to sit on my couch to take care of my body and I only sustain what I have. But knowing that I have that skill really honed from last year, that feels really liberating. It feels really empowering. And I feel like that strategically, that was the skill that had me create those epic results last year in a year that maybe I shouldn't have had those epic results. Does that make sense? So strategically, it's about knowing your business and knowing how to make good decisions. That was the biggest. And again, the lesson is just, I knew it was important, but it kind of like, no, it's really important. It's the thing. Mindset wise, again, both of these are relearnings. I know these things. Mindset wise, oh my God. I am a very, very, very independent person to a fault. It is my greatest asset and my biggest shadow. Leaning into my support is mindset wise, that's how I got these results in a year that I shouldn't have. Leaning into my support. So I have a really supportive partner. I asked for things that I never would have asked him to do. I asked for help. The other thing I would say in the first quarter is I had some struggles with, I'm just going to turn my fan on. Hold on one second. I had some struggles with brain fog, mostly around, I tended to do real well with my clients, but when it was like logistics and practical things and like even just like managing my supplements, some have to be taken at breakfast, some have to be taken before and after meals, some have to be taken at the end. I have like a whole spreadsheet of things I need when I do my yoga, when I do my morning walk, when I take this pill, blah, blah, blah. And it was so overwhelming for me. Brain fog in that area was especially hard for me. And so I asked him to help me. And this is stuff that I could and should totally do by myself. Like I almost felt like, oh my God, I'm a grown up. Like really, I'm asking him to help me organize my supplements. But yes, because one, that helped me preserve my energy for what I really needed to be doing, which was spending quality time with him, spending quality time with my clients. It really helped conserve my energy. But it also just felt so good to be like, I am not in this by myself. And I have a very supportive partner. But I think the lesson in the leaning in was just, I have to know something about what I need help with, even if it's like, I need help, I'm stuck here, can you help me figure this out? Like I need your help, but I don't even know what I need your help with. Even that is an edge for me. And so I had to really work on that. And this year was really helpful. Last year was really helpful for me to be able to say, well, here's your opportunity because you're too tired to do anything else. You really need that help. And especially at the end of the day, after working, I had no brain left. And so I did need help with those things. So the support that I leaned into specifically was with my partner on things like that I'm a grown up, I can handle myself. No, I needed help and he was so happy to do it, but I had to ask. I had to acknowledge that I needed it. My coach, I think it's also a good lesson in sometimes we think that we only should have coaching in a year where we're hitting the ground running and we're going to triple our income and blah, blah, blah. And or if you have a real problem, right? The business is going to fall apart if I don't do something about it now, right? And those are also good times to hire a coach. Nothing wrong with either of those things, but just maintaining and sustaining or dealing with a slower season, meaning I had lower energy. I had to approach things at a slower pace. That's just as good of a reason. And I am so, so, so grateful to my coach. And I'm so proud of myself for investing in a year where maybe I might have said, oh, I'm scared that I'm not going to be able to sustain. And since I need to slow down, let me just pull that investment off the table. Financially, that would have been a really safety providing moment for me. But no, what actually felt better was having that support. And that investment, when we invest in ourselves, when we invest in our business, I think that action and what that tells ourselves really is an important way to also create results. And so I think that was a really big piece of the results that I created, because I had that support, which again also meant that my reserves of energy were maintained and filled back up. Had I been saying like, I'll just push through this and do this on my own, I mean, I did do it on my own, let's be fair. But if I had pushed through without that support, I think I don't think I would have had those results, because it would have been too many things for my brain to manage and hold. I also have a killer VA, and she's been super helpful and flexible with me in changing shit all year long, in terms of how things work in the back end, because I would be like, okay, this is what we're going to do this week or this month. And then sometimes I was able to execute on that, and sometimes I wasn't. And so getting that support and asking her to say, could you do this for me if I'm not here for that? And having some backup plans was very, very, very helpful. And felt, again, that feeling of having that support. If I don't feel like I'm all alone in this, then again, I have more energy reserves to do what's most important, i.e. take care of my health, i.e. have a life, i.e. support my clients. And then the other support I leaned into was things like spreadsheets and checklists and SOPs. I already have a good set of SOPs and sort of things documented in my business, and I'm very, very, very grateful for that. But I was like forgetting, again, the logistics and the details pieces were sort of floating out of my brain. And so getting better at taking notes, getting better at asking my VA to help me with managing some of my to-do list, that kind of thing, was incredibly helpful. Even just my supplements, like I have a full page checklist of how I do my supplements every day so that I don't have to remember. And my job is then to just remember to check the checklist, because I think I know what I need to do. But again, holding myself back from having to remember that does preserve my energy and gives me more space, and it feels really good. Okay, I'm just gonna make a decision here. What I had to double down on most and what I'm celebrating the most. I think I can quickly go through these. So quickly, what I had to double down on the most from a strategy perspective, we've already talked about making the right decision of what to keep and what to drop or what to decrease. I think the other thing that I did that I haven't talked about much, but I have in other lives where I talked about behind the scenes in the business, that's why I'm not talking about it too much, is when I will say, even though I decreased some things, I did spend more time on the marketing that I put out. I put out less marketing pieces of content, but I spent more time on them to make them better. And I just think that's also just what's working right now. Again, I've done a couple of lives on that, so if that's a topic you want to hear about, let me know and I can send you the link. And then double down on my mindset. Like, I needed support to process the family stuff. I needed support with my health, right? I had to ask questions of my health practitioner. I had to get support with those things. I also, this last year was so crazy in terms of world events. I needed more mindset work. I had to double down on my mindset work and on the way that I support myself in that way, just to manage all of the breaking news and how I'm going to consume news and information. And so that was just an added, with the health, with the family, with that, that was just an added necessity for my mental health. Like, I needed more. I was fine all year because I doubled down on it. And I think that's really, really, really important to say. Like, I wasn't a mess emotionally, and I maybe woulda, coulda, shoulda been if I hadn't doubled down on all the support that I have and doubled down on all the mindset work that I do and just the general support that I get. So in other words, like, that was able to maintain, and I feel really good emotionally because I added support there. And that pulling back was a mindfuck, right? The pulling back in a season where I was ready to double my income and like I actually had everything set up to do that. That was not fun, I'm not gonna lie, but I still had a really fantastic year. And then finally, what I'm celebrating the most is basically, if I could have my second best year in a year where I was pulled back, imagine what I can do when I feel good. But again, what comes from that, the same thing that you can have for yourself, is what comes from that is making the right decision for the business, right? Knowing the business, backing myself, I had to really have some self-trust to be like, I'm going to take this successful Real Connections and just do half of it. Just do it half, cut it in half. I had to really back myself in that. I had to really think through the process. It was a real decision-making process. I think it took me maybe a month or so to make the decision once I kind of like floated it out there as an option. But the other piece that goes with this is, because I had a firm foundation, because I focused on the right things last year, and because I cut stuff off my plate, I now have the space and capacity. Like, I've grown the business and I'm not maxed out. I have created space and capacity. And so once that space and capacity, once I'm feeling even better, I will be more efficient. I will be able to work more hours. I will that space and capacity even grows in terms of just my hours in the day to support the business. And so that feels really good to be like, oh, I grew and I don't feel overwhelmed and stressed out and maxed out. I feel like, oh, I've got plenty of space once I start to feel like, once I hit another level of feeling of energy growth. So that feels really, really good. Okay, I'm going to hold off on, maybe I'll try to do a live on these, I think there's an interesting conversation about like the stuff that I slacked on, the stuff I didn't do well, because there's always something there. But I'll leave you in suspense for that. Let me just check the chat. Are there any final questions? Anything that didn't make sense or anything that you were surprised by? Okay, the replay. Yes, I'll give you the replay. Anything you were surprised by, let me know. And you can do that either here in the chat or you can always send me an email if you have like a question that you don't want to ask publicly. You can always ask privately. And a lot of times what I'll do when people send me private messages is I will take that question and I will turn it into another thing differently. And so if you do have a question, just know that you're going to be paying it forward. That's always something that I think is helpful for us as a community to be able to say, okay, if one person has this question, other people have this question. Okay, I think that's it. As I said, I do have some space available this quarter. At the moment, it's just 2 spots. That might change. But if you're interested in working with me, or if you're interested in starting the conversation, if you're not quite ready yet, you don't have to be ready to sign on the dotted lines to start the conversation. I feel like this is the time of year where we like to have exploratory conversations. We like to sort of start looking at options. And so if that's of interest to you, please feel free. In fact, because I think the chat was off, I'll just quickly put my links in the chat here. If you want to book a discovery call, if I can get it in there, you are more than welcome to. It's been really interesting. Thank you. You're so welcome. You're so welcome. I have not planned, full disclosure, I have not planned the next one. It'll be either late January or probably early February, and I will let you know on the topic. If you have a specific question or topic that you want me to cover, please shoot it my way. I will probably make that decision in the next week or 2. And otherwise, come to Real Connections next week, next Tuesday, and I will see you next time. Thanks for being here.